I just wanted to do a brief rebuttal of Paul Chek and his philosophy. He borrows a lot of ideas from a lot of his own personal research into philosophers, and I can tell that he borrows a lot from the similar modalities developed by Fred Newman in the 70s when he developed social therapy in the Bronx in New York City. Paul Chek admits that he was raised as a Christian Scientist, which is very believable because he claims that he can cure cancers and 60% of illnesses are psychosomatic, which very much fits in line with his his supposedly rejected philosophy of Christian Scientism that he was raised in. So that's pretty curious that he still basically practices Christian Science under the guise of secularism and not associating with Christianity. He's very anti-Catholic. He attacks Catholicism constantly in his videos, and which I'm not very hateful about. I don't feel a particular way about it, but once I understood that, just like Fred Newman, who developed social therapy, he also has two live-in girlfriends or wives that he calls. It's pretty easy to clear to see that he developed his philosophies about sex, pornography, and relationships based on a matter of convenience of what was um, convenient for him to have these relationships with two women. Obviously, he's hurting both the women by conducting himself in this fashion, but he doesn't see it that way, and they probably would deny that as well because he probably has them brainwashed, or accepting of this behavior. Um, so what Paul Chek does is he has this idea that he develops these five schemas of magical traditional thinking. Then he has modern thinking, which is like Richard Dawkins, and he has postmodern thinking, and then he has integral thinking, and he borrows a lot of the similar concepts from Fred Newman, whether he realizes it or not. And I agree with him on a lot of what he says. Coincidentally, I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic, but he does make a lot of good points about neurosis and black and white thinking and the things that hold back the thought processes of the uber religious. How someone can be an adult in an adult body, but have the impulses and the drives in the mind of a child. So there's a lot going on that's very truthful about what Paul Chek is involved in. But once you understand that, he's doing this for self promotion in order to supposedly act as a healing guru to people who have cancer and other forms of disease, as well as to enrich himself personally and to conduct a relationship with two women. It's pretty clear that he's based in a chauvinistic mindset of, I'm a man and I can have the resources that I want to have without conducting a moral or emotionally growthful life. He claims to be about emotional growth, but he clearly isn't if he's involved in an immoral, licentious relationship with two women. And he's probably going to attack me, or maybe not. Probably won't even watch this video if he even finds it, but because it attacks his philosophy. But it's clear that his point of view would be that that I am reacting to it from a traditional or magical point of view, a primordial, primitive view of sexuality, and that he can have this relationships with two women that can be seen as ethical and moral, and and because he's giving to both partners. But it's clear from someone who can understand the guise of false prophets of and he says it himself that the people stuck in the first two levels of the the magical and the mythical thinking. He probably would judge me as being a more mythical thinker, would see him and people like Eckhart Tolle as antichrists. But that doesn't mean that he's not an antichrist, because if he conducts himself in his personal life as an antichrist, if he's a snake oil salesman in the way that he promotes his ventures of health and mind body, claiming that the mind and the body are the same thing, the brain and the body are the same thing, they're clearly not. They are intertwined. I think it's funny that a guy like this would target Catholicism so staunchly. He wasn't raised in it. He's very ignorant of it. He doesn't understand it. But it's clear that he's a form of an antichrist who sees the truth in Catholicism and wants to attack it, even though he was raised in Christian Science. He still believes in most of the Christian Science values that we can heal people like Jesus Christ. He claims he can heal people of different forms of cancer when it's clear that the holistic approach to healing is not as defined as he likes to believe it is. That there are also needs for medical chemotherapy and traditional forms of medicine, and his attack on traditional Christianity, on Catholicism, is just a guise where he can promote his immorality and view it as a form of moral relativism, that everything goes and that he can do whatever he likes, while he is clearly perpetrating harm, emotional harm on his spouses. Can you imagine being in a relationship, being pregnant with a baby or having a baby, and then having this husband who's also with another woman? And when you're dealing with your issues, he goes and or you get in an argument with this man, he goes and has a relationship with another woman conveniently for a few days, and he comes back to you, and he kind of treats women like a renewable resource, not as human beings. And he sees women as objects that he can just control or use as consumerist items. And it's funny that he's anti-consumerism when that's what he's actually perpetrating on the masses. This is just a short video. If Paul Chek wants to respond to some of my accusations, feel free. He probably won't, because he's a sort of like a proto-cultist leader in the vein of Fred Newman and others. And he likes to paint the idea that Catholics have a weak mind, because if he can keep people away from the truth of Catholicism, then he can keep them into his cult-like atmosphere of self-promotion, of, that he's some kind of healer. He claims to be some kind of shaman, but he's clearly satanic and demonic in the reality. If you can see through the guise of his very eloquent his speaking is very eloquent. He's very persuasive in his speech, but he's clearly satanic in what he believes and how he achieves his aims. He's the type that will claim to be trying to help you and help your spiritual growth, but then actually is only doing that as a form of a means to an end for him to gain more resources, more wealth, and whatever he desires, his greedy intentions of his soul. Even he admits that a person in his fifth integral stage is actually a composite of all the 5 stages. So he's basically a snake oil salesman. Stay away from him. He's an antichrist, and I look forward to having the discussion on this jerk. But thank you. Bye.